Okay, so we're going to begin a very important topic tonight. We're holding in the middle of the series that challenges the struggles and trials of the 21st century. And tonight's topic has to do with atheism. Atheism is related to faith, it's related to religion, and as a result of it being a very, very big topic, I decided to perhaps speak on faith and religions, the many religions in the world, separately. It would just be too much information to handle in one lecture. Tonight's topic, however, I'd like to call atheism man's biggest delusion. As you will see, man deludes himself into believing that which he chooses to believe. It is not always something very well thought of. It's sometimes just easier to believe in a certain way. And when something comes about easy, it's not always necessarily right. It's not always necessarily correct. Something important and vital in our life, a major decision, requires tremendous effort, and perhaps a lot of thought needs to go into it if we want to be sure as much as possible that what we're doing is good, that what we're doing will come out right, whether it's remodeling your home, whether it's preparing yourself for a major day in court, major project. You want to do your research, you want to do your homework. You don't just want to believe in that which is easier to believe, only because there's maybe not enough evidence, as some people would like to claim, enough evidence to believe in a God and a deity of sorts. There are a lot of reasons why in this generation people are struggling with faith and with religion. And it's something which, unfortunately, has a tremendous effect on people's life. It is a well-known fact that if a home is a home where there are certain values that are held very, very strong, a home where there's a belief in a God, in a supreme being, a home where there is sanctity in the way the parents conduct themselves, in the teachings, in the morals. There's no doubt that such a home will be guided very differently than a home that is empty of these values. On this, perhaps there's no argument, even though you will have certain people make the claim that you could be a good person and you can have a nice home without being religious whatsoever. And I'm going to talk about that too. But there's no doubt that religion, if it's properly guided, we're not talking about extremism right now. Religion, faith in God, if it's properly guided, if it permeates every aspect of our life, can make a very big difference on the quality of life that we experience. We'll begin, as I did in the past lectures, to define what atheism is. One definition says that atheism is the rejection of belief in the existence of deities. Atheism says there are no gods, there's no supreme being, there's no creator to the world. I would prefer to call it the deliberate escape from reality. That's my definition, because reality is what we observe. And even though there's a lot that we don't observe, if we were to take the time to observe closely, not superficially, but closely, at the world, at life, at creation, we perhaps would arrive at a different conclusion. Unfortunately, this is something that not too many people do, to take the time to think about this topic. As I said before, if something is important to you, if this could make a big difference in a person's life, if something is real or not, if I should adopt this, if I should believe in this, and I don't take the time to do this, that's irresponsibility. A lot of people, unfortunately, have the weakness of putting things off. They see the consequences. Many times they're sorry for having put something off. You don't always get a second chance. If something is important, make the time for it. And our tradition is very clear about this, that if we take the time and make the effort to try to figure out if the Torah is real, if God is real, we will arrive at the correct conclusion. No doubt whatsoever. Our tradition says that we will receive divine assistance from above, to be able to arrive at the right conclusion. As long as we're honest, we have an open mind, we don't have any preconceived notions, we haven't made up our minds already before, we start from scratch, and one of the most important qualities that can help very, very much an individual arrive at the truth is humbleness. Because humbleness will remind us, it will teach us that man is not all capable of knowing everything there is. Man's mind is limited. Humbleness reminds us of who we are. You know, as great as we may be, as knowledgeable as we may be, nonetheless, we're only human. And what does that mean to be only human? That we make mistakes. So humbleness, I very much believe, can contribute a great deal to being able to figure out the truth. There have always been heretics, there have always been atheists in the past. What's so different about today than the past is that today we have many of them. Atheism has become a cult. It has become even a club, much more than in the past. And that is the phenomenon that we need to understand. Why is it so? Why do we have many people running away from religion? And I'm talking about even those who were raised with it at home. Those who were brought up with religion in their home, they saw it, they saw their parents, they saw their grandparents, they studied it, they went to religious schools, and to see them running away from it, or becoming weaker in their attachment to those values, makes us think maybe something is going on that we're unaware of. I mean, is it their fault? Is it somebody else's fault? Whose fault is it? Now, let's not forget that we all have free will. Free will means don't blame others for your decision necessarily. It all starts from a person making certain decisions about what he wants to do and what he wants to believe. However, there are factors that can contribute to those decisions, and that's a little bit of what we are going to analyze. What are some of those factors that have led people to let go of their faith and has not allowed, for similar reasons, others to embrace faith? So part of it, we've already explained in another lecture about materialism, has to do with the primordial sin, where we are exposed to God's message to humanity. God's message to humanity is revealed to us in the very beginning of Genesis, in Bereshit. We have the incident of the serpent, we have the incident of Adam and Chava rebelling against God. All they had was one instruction, one commandment, and they couldn't keep it. And what is the message there? The message is a very powerful message to all of humanity. It's the beginning of creation. You got to know this forever. There is an innate weakness in the human being to accept authority. He does not accept authority easily. He rebels. He does not want authority. He wants to be able to be independent and free to do as he wishes. Plus, there is the other issue of ta'ava, of desire. Man desires many things. He wants to get his hands on many things. He enjoys all kinds of pleasures. That is what the physical human being is all about. That's not the soul, however. The soul has other aspirations. The soul is spiritual. The soul is divine. There's a continuous conflict, therefore, between the soul and the physical body. Should I do this? Should I not do this? But this ta'ava, this desire, along with the refusal to accept authority, is what causes many, many problems when it comes to observance of Torah and mitzvot, observing the commandments, following the path of the Torah. However, there is another message that perhaps is overlooked. If you recall, What was the punishment for going against God? בזיעת אפיך תאכל לחם. You will eat bread with the sweat of your brow, right? If I can recall the translation in English. What does that mean? That means you will have to work hard. Now, I know some people don't work hard at all for their money, but in general, it's a description of what man will need to do in order to put bread on the table. He will have to work, and it will not come easy. Sustenance, therefore, even though God provides us, comes at a price. We have to apply ourselves. We have to get an education. We have to go to work. We have to work hard to be able to survive. This is a message that not only will food be hard to get, not only will we have to work to be able to survive physically, emunah, faith in God, will also require us to be proactive. Emunah, faith, will not be something easy. It will not just be obvious to believe in God. It will require effort. So it's a very interesting idea here. Not everybody sees the connection. But in the same way that one has to apply himself physically, one has to work to put food on the table, spiritually, to refine one's character is not easy. To elevate oneself, in other words, to sanctify oneself, to become closer to God, requires a lot of work, even more work than physical work. So emunah is no different. Emunah, from the very beginning, God is telling us, now it is up to you to discover me. Now it is up to you to work hard to find me. Don't misunderstand me. There's a lot of kids that don't work that hard to figure this out. They were taught this by their parents in school. They're not having to rediscover this as Abraham did as a child, being raised in a home of idols, idolaters. But generally speaking, faith will not be something so easy for everyone to accept. For some it will be easier, but for others it will be difficult. The Chazon Ish, of blessed memory, says as follows, and this ties into what we just said, how one needs to strive to figure things out until they become clear. He says, emunah, the essence of emunah is not just to believe. It is the desire to discover the truth. The desire needs to be constant. There needs to be a desire, continuous desire, to always want to know the truth, to always try to discover it. It's not just to believe, even though many believe blindly. It's very nice. It's very good. Sometimes, it's better to just believe and not to have any doubts. But real emunah, the real emunah involves much more than just belief. It involves the desire to know the truth. I'm not satisfied with what I know. I want to continue to know the truth. And that is why we have various opinions in Jewish philosophy that hold that a Jew should continuously reinforce his faith. Reinforce his faith by pondering the creation, perhaps by getting a closer look at things that he usually ignores. Things just like, animals and butterflies, flowers, plant life. Just anything. Get a closer look at this beautiful creation, at the design that one sees everywhere. Look at it, analyze it, and perhaps this will stimulate your emunah to greater heights by seeing these things, by not taking it for granted, by seeing how God overlooks, or oversees, I should say, all of creation and provides for everybody, for everything that he created. How his majesty fills the entire universe. There's so much that one can take a close look if you were to take the time and stop and think about these things. So this is an important idea that the Rabbi, the Chazon Ish, shares with us, is that with emunah one has to continuously strive to know the truth. Rabbis, however, tell us that this truth will be lacking in the end of days. It will be much harder to find out the truth. something that may have made sense to us in the past will not come as easy. In the end of days, it will be a bigger struggle. Why will the end of days be any different than the past? Rabbis tell us in the Gemara, it will be so difficult that ha'emet ne'ederet v'na'aset adarim adarim, truth will be lacking, and you will have many cults, many groups that will claim we have the truth. In other words, many more religions, many groups that will have their own beliefs and their own thoughts about what the truth is. Somehow there will be more confusion, more doubt, and it will be more difficult to ascertain what the truth is. So as I said earlier, there are many factors that contribute to this. It's not just the difficulty in accepting authority. The situation is different in Judaism and in non-Jewish groups as well. I mean, this problem exists everywhere, but the situation is a little bit different. First of all, what happened in the past 200 years or so was that we've had an enlightenment movement, if you've heard of it, Nuat HaSkala, as it is called in Hebrew. A movement that very much emphasized free thinking. They came up with new philosophies, perhaps you can call it philosophies about life, just different ways of reforming what was standard in the past. A certain reformation, a certain change in the way people do things, in the way people live their lives. That was the Enlightenment. And it was something to do with the mind. It wasn't just that the physical body had certain desires that it wanted to fulfill. It was bright minds, great minds of people who came up with all kinds of innovative ideas somehow. And this innovation brought about a certain desire or interest to free oneself of what was the norm or what was the standard belief in the past. I think, and I think others as well have said the same thing, that there was a certain interest also in getting away from the church. The church exercised a tremendous amount of power in the past. And today, they don't have that same power that they did in the past. But back then, that institution was extremely powerful. And they indoctrinated, of course, their beliefs in people, and people began to rebel against that indoctrination. The free thinking, or the movement to want to become, disattached from that institution, brought about a certain change in the way people believe. So that is just one factor, something that is obvious, something that one can actually go back to history and see where the change occurs and where the world went after that. There has been a tremendous increase in materialism. That is also obvious, an important factor that we've spoken about. An increase in materialism, which of course contributes to people wanting to lead a certain lifestyle that may not always be compatible with religion. We have the means today. It is a higher standard of living today. And as a result of that, it's just natural that a person would want to spend more time on himself, on enjoying himself, and not spend as much time trying to figure out what's the purpose or the meaning of life. So many people are being blinded by all this materialism and not being able to focus properly on what really matters, what's really important in life. There is a very important Zohar that sheds even more light on the end of days. The Zohar says as follows: in the year 600, in the 6th millennium, in other words, in the year 1840, which is, 175 years ago, right? At this point, at this junction, 1840, the gates of wisdom will open up. A fascinating Zohar. Now remember, the Zohar was written about 1700 years ago, give or take. And it's telling us the future, that in the year 1840, the Jewish year 5600, the gates of wisdom will open up. What does that mean? Well, if you look at 1840, around that time, you will notice a tremendous advancement or progress in technology. One thing after another. Whether it was photography, whether it was a locomotive, whether it was the immunization, right? Electricity, travel by plane later on. I mean, one by one. Tremendous change. Up until then, life was pretty much the same everywhere. A few minor changes occurred here and there. The printing press a few hundred years ago, eyeglasses, ammunition, right? Explosives and so forth. I mean, there were some changes, but these past few generations, we've seen incredible changes, major changes that have to do with chokhmah, with wisdom. The gates of wisdom have opened up. Now, what has this contributed? What has this done? Well, of course, it has made life a little bit easier. It has changed, however, the mindset of many people. People don't realize it, but what has happened is that this science, these scientific advances, has led to a new religion called science. In other words, science has really become a religion in itself, a religion that does not believe in a God, a religion that believes on proving something based on evidence and facts, of course, and logic, of course. Nothing to do with belief, with faith alone. That is the mindset, or that is the attitude, or that is the approach of a scientist. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to know if something is scientifically acceptable, there are certain rules that you have to follow. And that is obvious. Nobody has anything to disagree here. I mean, it is obvious to everyone that that is the protocol that science follows. The problem is, you can already figure this out on your own, that this is not the way emunah, or faith, works. Religion doesn't work exactly like that. And they begin to clash. Should there be a clash? No. Science, if anything, would help religion. Science can actually be a tool where you can become religious through it. Many scientists have said that the more they study science, the closer they become to God. In other words, the more they can see God. So science is a powerful tool. If you think about it, it is even more powerful than religion, than regular religion, to make someone recognize that there is a God in this world. On the other hand, where science failed is exactly what happened with the Nachash, with the serpent, with the story of the serpent, is that somehow it has a power to tempt, or to distract, or to mislead the individual, as it says there in the Torah and the Bible, V'item kelokim. If you eat from this fruit, you will be like angels. You will be all powerful, all knowing. This is why I said before that if there's no humility, something will be lacking here. Science has taken man and enabled him to see, to know, and to do all kinds of things that were impossible in the past. He has become powerful. He has become knowledgeable. We're talking about the gates of wisdom having opened up. And these gates of wisdom could be very beneficial, but it could also have the opposite effect of taking man and allowing him to think in a delusional way that he knows it all, that he can figure anything, he can do almost anything. But that's not true. If one is really humble, he knows that that's not true. What happened after all that? After the gates of wisdom opened up, you have children and future generations that are growing up in schools that are devoid of religious thinking, only science. If they had both, that would be great. but to have only the opinion of what scientists say and not what has been accepted throughout all the generations of the past, what our forefathers gave their lives for, what many non-Jews believed all along, what the greatest minds believed. To do away with that, they didn't know what they were talking about. They made up fairy tales. This is what you should believe. This is it. There's nothing else. What science has to say is what you should accept. Kids are growing up with that. So they're no longer making their own decisions, whether to believe or not. The decisions are being made for them. What has made things worse is not just the study of science. The study of science by itself is not harmful necessarily. It's what scientists introduced. One of the things that they introduced, I say introduced because there are many discoveries in science, and the discoveries are fine. What they introduced is not a discovery. It is a deliberate, premeditated philosophy or theory of evolution. Are there any facts, real scientific facts? Zero. I'm saying scientific. There's all kinds of theories, speculations. There's something called microevolution, which we can actually see to a certain extent. But macroevolution, that man came from monkey, this major drastic change over the years, whether it's millions of years or not makes no difference. The fact that people can actually think of that tells you something. Something is fishy here. Because there is no scientific proof in the way we have scientific proof in chemistry, physics, and biology. The same kind of proof that we have in those areas does not exist in evolution. And I'm not only saying this, and I have studied this, of course. I'm also quoting from many ex-evolutionists who have said the same thing. Ex-evolutionists, not creationists, not religious people, ex-evolutionists who admitted, because they were humble and honest, that there are no hard facts. There's no real evidence. This is not real science. It's a theory, and it's not even a theory. It is a story that they want to sell us, that they want us to believe. But you know what? It's not, I think, such a good idea for me to say my opinion here, because there's a lot of people perhaps out there that are going to say, well, everybody is entitled to their opinion, you know, that's your opinion. And I don't really want to get into the topic of evolution because there's so much information available that anyone who really wishes to do his homework and check it out himself can see it. That this is totally unfounded. And I'm not exaggerating when I say unfounded. So the best thing for me to do is just to quote Mr. Darwin himself, who is the one who came up with this. And I think that's the best. So I'm going to quote him in one of his letters. I'm quite conscious that my speculations run beyond the bounds of true science. It is a mere rag of a hypothesis with as many flaws and holes as sound parts. Okay? What does this say? Of course, you're going to have evolutionists that are going to say, well, things have changed ever since. All kinds of excuses, only excuses, but the reality is that not much has changed. It cannot be proven. Nothing has been found. And of course, they're going to say, well, maybe one of these days they'll find it. Yeah, but one of these days is not science. What could happen? One of these days we'll discover the missing link. One of these days we'll be able to prove it. Right now, we don't have enough. But we have something. That's not science. That is, like he said, a speculation. But my favorite is another quote of his that talks about some level of belief that he had in God. After all, you might think that this guy was an atheist. This is what he said. I'm quoting. The question of whether there exists a creator and ruler of the universe has been answered in the affirmative by some of the highest intellects that have ever existed. It's what we said before. There have been great intellects, wise men in the past who have said there is. Why? Why did they say yes? Well, apparently, maybe there's something out there. But let's get back to the topic of why people have let go. And I say let go because, all right, somebody never knew about it, then maybe he is going to have a little bit of an uphill battle discovering it on his own, especially if he lives in our times where religion in many circles is not so popular. Science is more popular. Okay, so if he's trying to discover it on his own, he's going to have a struggle. But what if people who had this in their life, why did they let go? Why did they stop being religious? And I'm talking about Jews and non-Jews, both. There's a long list. There are many factors, as we said. Here are some. There are, unfortunately, kids who've had a childhood trauma. Something happened in their youth, in their childhood, whether it was at home or in school, whether it was with a teacher that they very much trusted. It could be many things. A trauma of sorts that has shocked them to the point of they said, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with this. This can't be true. You know, how could somebody like that do this to me if he's religious? Right? There are many examples like that, by the way, of all types of situations where people have been victimized, hurt by religious people. Is this what religion is? Now, I'm going to give you a list of some of the factors here, but I'm not going to necessarily try to resolve it. In other words, this individual, for example, that went through trauma needs counseling by someone not only who's professional, who knows how to counsel, but someone who's familiar with the problem, someone who's religious, who can explain to him exactly what happened and why it happened, and hopefully to his satisfaction. So, you know, we're not going to get into how to go about that, but that's something that needs to be done for someone who experienced trauma. There are disappointments, all kinds of disappointments that people have with God. God is not helping me, you know, disappointments with just all kinds of situations that did not turn out to be the way they wanted. And as a result of their disappointment, maybe they're depressed, they lost interest. Then you have individuals who have looked at the world and said to themselves, how could there be so much evil in the world if God exists? This is very common, by the way, for many atheists to use this as an excuse. There can't be a God. Or, why should there be so many religions and faiths? Why can't there be one? Why couldn't God's message come through one prophet for everyone? Or to all the prophets with the same message? We have different kinds of messages. We have different religions, different beliefs. Why? It doesn't make sense. Maybe there is no such thing. Then you have people who prayed for somebody who was sick or themselves and they weren't helped. Their prayers went unanswered. Maybe they lost hope as a result of that, and they dropped religion. And the most recent tragedy that unfortunately we all know about is the Holocaust. You know how many Jews just said, I don't want to do this anymore? Where was God in the Holocaust, which there's a lecture about, by the way? Where was he? All I can tell you is we're not going to judge them. We definitely are not in their shoes to know what they were feeling, what they were going through, and we have no right to judge them. We don't know what we would have done and how we would have reacted. But we do know from tradition that if the roots of faith are shallow at home to begin with, then all it takes is for a very powerful storm to knock down one's faith. And the Holocaust was a very, very powerful storm. What these people saw with their own eyes, it's terrible. If the roots of faith are deep, they can withstand. They have a better chance. It's not 100% guaranteed, but they have a better chance of withstanding all kinds of pressures and painful experiences. But this is something that unfortunately had an effect on people's faith. Then you have intelligent people, very intelligent people with a very high IQ, who simply don't know where the evidence to God is. They can't prove it. They say that there's not enough proof. In other words, their demand of proof is so great that they're obviously not going to find it. You know, they can if they receive proper guidance as to what constitutes at least circumstantial evidence, what constitutes enough proof to make this believable. So very, very smart people, which a little bit I explained last time, have a difficulty with receiving certain explanations and considering them satisfactory. They're smart, so they demand a different kind of proof, which they may not easily get just from anyone. My suggestion, my advice to these very, very smart people who want solid proof is attend a seminar that is geared towards convincing or towards demonstrating. I didn't want to say convincing because convincing is up to the individual, but demonstrating to Jews, for example, that this is the truth. In other words, what our forefathers gave to us, what they transmitted to us, can be proven to be 100% true, not 90%, not 99%, 100% true. It can be proven, but you have to attend a seminar that's geared for that is methodical, that lasts for several days, where one can see from A to Z what he may never have taken the time to see or to study. So it can be done if you want it. Then you have individuals who have a problem with contradictions. They read the Torah, they read the Bible, they read many books, and they say, wait a minute, there's contradictions here. This doesn't make sense. In his eyes, there's some contradiction. He didn't read the commentaries. He didn't ask a rabbi or someone to explain to him. So he's making certain assumptions. Without outside help, he may not get a clear idea of what the text is saying. So in his eyes, there's all kinds of contradictions. Now, there are issues out there. Issues, I mean, certain complexities, whether it's in the Bible, certain laws are complex, certain ideas are complex. And I'm not talking about right now the Christian Bible, which we'll talk about another time. Even the Torah itself, in the Talmud, in the Gemara, in the Midrash, there are many things that are not so easy to understand. And without proper guidance from someone who's really an expert in this, one may come to the wrong conclusions as to what is being said in the text. Then you have the individual who says, who needs religion? I can be a good person without religion. Kind, helpful, charitable, good husband, devoted. So why need religion? This is actually something that many people claim, that perhaps there's no need for it. Then you have those who say, you know what, religion to begin with was invented by man because it does bring about a certain order, or it somehow helps regulate life for certain people and for society as a whole. So it's man-made according to them, and it's not something that is divine. It's not something that God asked us to believe in or to lead our lives by. It's man-made. Some committee decided to put together some bylaws, right? And basically these bylaws are changeable. For those who believe that the Torah is, for example, not divine, that's what they're going to believe, that Moses or some other committee put it together, and we need to change them because those laws were meant for years ago. They're no longer, in their mind, applicable today. So man, in his ingenious mind and creative mind, will come up with all kinds of excuses why not to follow it. And they don't even realize that this is all the advice or the ingenuity or the creativity of that serpent that we read about in the beginning of Bereshit. In the same way he convinced Adam and Chava back then, he's misleading you right now. He's using your imagination. He's using your trauma. He's using your personal experiences to basically counter what has been always accepted by great minds, by your parents and grandparents. What do you think, you're smarter than them? What's going on? Think for a moment. They actually were primitive? All of them, the greatest of minds, they were just primitive. They didn't know what they're talking about. Or they lied to you? It's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination, but that's what the human mind does if it's not humble. And forgets that it is capable of coming up with all kinds of ideas that are really not correct. They're just simply not correct. They're mistaken. And then you have those who say, wait a minute, there's so much war. There's so many problems in the world. Look what religion has done. In the name of religion, there have been so many wars. Look how destructive it has been. Look at all the extremists in the name of religion. Look what they do. So you see, I just gave you a few examples of why people come up with all kinds of reasons of why to let go religion or why not to embrace it. They have a difficulty with this. And what makes it more difficult is that they don't even ask the right people. They don't sit down and say, you know what, let's have an open conversation about this. I really want to be convinced. Instead of being an atheist, some people might say, I'm agnostic. Please, prove it to me. That's already a different attitude. But if a person says, I'm an atheist, that means he's already made up his mind. Pretty much. Don't confuse me with the facts. This is what I want to believe. But if a person is flexible, he's an agnostic, he says, you know what, I'd like to believe. This is something that my forefathers believed. They gave their lives for this. It was obvious to them somehow. I'd like to be convinced too. Can you convince me? Then, of course, this individual would have to go to the right people and the right sources to get that information that he needs. It wouldn't be fair to just leave him on his own because, not because he may turn to the wrong sources, but also he may never do it. He may get distracted. He may forget. After all, he's got to pay his bills. There are other more important things that he thinks are more important than trying to figure this out. So many people have doubts in their life. So many people have issues that they're not dealing with only because they don't make time for them. Why not make time for this? Speak to the right people. Let them present you with all the information and answer all your questions as much as possible. And then decide for yourself. Now we've come to the point of trying to figure out the psychology of the human being. Not so much as to reasons or factors that have contributed to atheism or to the detachment from tradition, but the psychology. And the psychology of the human being basically says like this. The human being is limited. Limited not only physically, he can't do everything that he would like to do. We can't fly like a bird. We don't have the vision of an eagle. We're limited. The mind is also limited. The mind cannot know everything there is to know. And the human being is also easily meshuchad. Meshuchad in English is bribed. You can easily bribe the human mind. The human being can easily be bribed. The human being can also imagine all kinds of things. He has a very, very strong imagination. And that is why the Torah, in considering the human being's abilities and weaknesses, the Torah warns us. Be very careful if you're a judge. You're a judge. What does that mean? You're smart. You hopefully can resolve issues. But be careful, even though you're smart and you know how to resolve an issue, bribery, a bribe, has the ability to blind even those who are righteous. Even the wise can be blinded. It can distort the truth. Bribe is very powerful. And as Rabbi Eliyahu Kin said in one of his books, what this does is that it makes it difficult for the individual to find fault in another individual who has done him a favor. This other individual who he's judging has done him a favor, has given him a gift. You think you can actually find fault and ignore all his merits, in other words, and look away and just talk about the faults, in other words, and find him guilty, I mean, it's going to be very difficult to look away from those faults. So, imagine, Rabbi Dessler says, if it's difficult to overlook those faults, in other words, and to try to ascertain the truth with someone who gave you a gift, because we're blind to that. In other words, we're blind in seeing the truth about this particular case. The more so if this involves our own personal wishes. We have certain desires, we have certain personal interests. If one is blind towards someone else, the more so he will be blind to his own interests. If this goes against, if religion goes against my interest, I'm going to be blinded. I'm not necessarily going to accept it so easily. Look at what the Torah tells us about other people. You're judging others. The more so you have to be careful when it comes to your own personal interests. Perhaps you're being blinded and you're not seeing the truth. How does bias work? Bias, we have bias. So Rabbi Dessler continues to explain elsewhere that the thought, the machshava, the thought of an individual, how does it come about? It is formulated as a result of curiosity or of a certain desire or an interest in something, a topic, whatever. Since we have an interest, a thought is developed. So because thoughts develop as a result of an interest that we have to look into something or to do something, we have to be careful with those thoughts that pertain to ourselves, because there's a certain bias when something involves ourselves. In other words, when something affects ourselves. Here we're formulating a thought. We're thinking about something. A thought is something very powerful. That means we're into it. We're focused on it. Why are we focused on it? Because we have a desire. We have an interest in something. We want to do something. We're planning something. So we think about it. So this thought is dangerous. Because if it's a thought about something that affects me, if it's a thought that is personal, what will that thought do? It may not allow any additional thoughts to get in the way. Bias means that there's something there before. There's something apparently or potentially more powerful than what I want to introduce now. It's sitting there. It's a thought. Thought is not just a thought. I mean, a thought is something that we've shown a desire to formulate it. We're thinking about it. So there are people out there who are thinking about certain things that are important to them, and comes along religion and says, no, I don't want it to get in the way. I already have certain thoughts or certain beliefs that I've formulated. I have certain interests. There's a certain bias. And that bias is, of course, something that blinds people from accepting someone else's opinion. Not even giving it a chance. So Rabbi Dessler continues to say like this. That's just a thought. Now let's look at observing something. Observing something is actually seeing it with your eyes. Okay? Thoughts are powerful. Observing something is even more powerful. When you observe something, you see it, right? It leaves a much stronger impression in you than just thinking about something. Now, what's the problem with observing something? We see it superficially because we're only seeing it externally. We don't have X-ray vision, right? So when we see something, we're seeing it just externally. Nonetheless, we see something. That observation, however, is not so strong. It's not complete because it does not see the pnimiyut. Rabbi Dessler says when we see something, we're seeing the chitzoniyut. We're seeing the external part or aspect of it. We're not seeing the essence of it. We can't see the molecules. We don't see the atoms of it. We don't see the essence of what we're looking at. However, there are machines that can. X-ray machines. They can. So, What does that mean? It means that the human being, even though on his own does not have necessarily the best vision, or only usually looks at things externally, he still has the ability somewhere, somehow, to see something on a deeper level. That is through his soul. The physical eyes can only see so much. The soul, in conjunction with the heart, can penetrate a lot more than just a visual observation. I don't know how to say it in English so well, but in Portuguese there's a very good word that I don't know the definition of it in other languages, but it's called enxergar. In other words, I could see something visually, but I can't make out what it is. The closest word perhaps to that Portuguese word is to perceive, perception. I see it, but do I perceive it? Do I really see it, or I'm just looking at things, but I don't really make out or perceive the true nature of what I'm looking at.
And nothing the soul of the person?
No, we're talking about right now about religion, about faith. So we may see things, but we may not perceive properly what we're looking at. So Rabbi Dessa continues on to say that true emunah, true faith, is an awareness. It's observing something with one's heart. It's therefore a deeper observance of something, not just a superficial observance from the outside. And therefore, if this observance is real, it has to be free from any bias. Otherwise, it's not going to be a true awareness or a real perception of the essence of what I'm looking at. It will be superficial. You're not seeing the real person. Do you know this person? Oh, I see him. Nice looking person. What if I tell you he's rotten? I can't see that. Well, of course not. How are you going to see that? You got to live with a person. You got to work with a person to get to know him better. When we see something or someone, we don't really see everything about them. Right? And that is why Solomon tells us, be careful, be careful not to be misled by a woman's beauty or charm. It can mislead you. Right? Or as the rabbi tells, Al tistakel bakankan, don't look at the jar. Look at what's inside. You know, it's more important what's inside the person, his character. Then outside he doesn't look that pleasant. I mean, pleasing. You know, good looking. You know, some people don't look that nice, but they could be very, very special. So the exteriors are misleading. That is what the Torah warns us. Don't make yourself an image of God. Besides the danger of idolatry, besides all the other explanations given about what's wrong with making an image, because God does not have an image, the idea behind not making a pesel, an image of God, is because you are giving God, or you are seeing him in a physical manner, in a very superficial, external way, instead of seeing him in the more deeper way. By making something that represents him, supposedly, you are making it very, very superficial. You are giving him the appearance or the likes of other things that you identify with or that you know of, and it's not true, because there's nothing like him. You are not allowed to therefore give him any physical appearance. Not only is it not physical, not only is it not possible to describe him physically, but you're deluding yourself by doing that. You're now acquiring a certain image of him, an external image, instead of a deeper connection to him, which is the ultimate goal that Judaism teaches, that we need to connect, lidavek, to be connected, to be attached ourselves to God. Anyway, there are many, many ways to reach the truth, to be convinced of the truth. All I will mention for now is perhaps one of the most important ones, and that is lehatmid, to be constant in one's pursuit of trying to figure out the truth, which means that what is required of us is to be proactive. If one is not going to be proactive and constantly pursue and try to figure it out and try to ask questions, raise questions, and try to get the right answers, of course, if he's not going to do something about it, then he's going to be distracted and will never be able to figure it out. If it's important to one, then he has to be constant about it and be careful not to lose focus, not to be distracted by all the things that exist out there. There are many, many things that will distract us from pursuing the truth, from trying to figure this out, this important question. Therefore, one of the best favors anybody can do for himself, if he has any doubts, is to be constant in his pursuit of figuring out what emunah is and what's expected of him. I want to finish up with a very important saying by Nikola Tesla, who was an inventor, a great mind, who lived about 100 years ago, who says as follows: "The gift of mental power comes from God, divine being. And if we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power." What's so special about this? What he just said? Because it's pretty much what we just said now. But the constant focus or being in tune with this. We have the gift of mental power for some reason. Why? Obviously, God gave this to us for a good reason. Not just to build this world, not just to make skyscrapers or get to the moon. This tremendous mental power, this is a gift from God to know Him. It enables us to get to know Him. That's what it is. I mean, we have a soul that is divine, that is a part of Him. But we are enclosed in a physical body. But this physical body has the brains, has the faculties, has the common sense, the logic, and hopefully the humility to be able to recognize that there is a God. So what does it take? It was concentrating our minds on that truth. If we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power. Last but not least, past 30 years or so, we have seen many people come back to their faith. Many Jews and non-Jews are becoming more spiritual, more religious. There is a certain movement out there of teshuvah. There's certain people who definitely have come to the conclusion that life is so vain. There's a certain emptiness in their personal life. And perhaps they've given it a lot of thought. So a lot of people are coming back. A lot of people are becoming more and more religious. And that is a good sign that Mashiach is coming soon. Amen. Because the rabbis tell us that this world is olam ha-sheker, is a world of lies, of falsehood. There's a lot of deceit. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of things that will not allow us to focus on what's really important. They'll disturb us. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, that's his job, to interrupt you, to just distract you. So it's olam ha-sheker. You know, what you see is not always what you get. There are certain things out there that are not real. They're fake. But there are certain things that are real. And one of those, of course, is God. But it's up to us to discover. And, of course, it is our wish and our prayer that Mashiach will come soon, because when Mashiach comes, the truth will be revealed. Up until then, man will have this tremendous challenge, very, very big struggle of trying to know what the truth is. There'll be a lot of confusion. A lot of confusion. All sorts of religions. All sorts of philosophies. People will have all kinds of personal experiences and doubts. This is olam ha-sheker. It's not easy, as we said before. I didn't say it's easy, but it's possible. And God willing, when Mashiach comes, B'ezrat Hashem, it will be obvious to everyone. Amen.
Amen.